Welcome to Eating in April's, and I am going to do something a little different today. You can probably hear the sound of the dishwasher in the background. That's okay. You may hear the dog singing to us, and the cat may get up on the counter, but that's all right. I'm going to show you how to make a meatloaf and the mushroom gravy that I serve with it today. And the recipe that I use comes from the very famous Sandra Lee. And I use her Salisbury steak and mushroom gravy recipe. And instead of making individual steaks with it, I make it into a meatloaf. And I'm going to make the meatloaf first and put it in the oven and then make the gravy. And I'm going to do everything from start to finish so that you can see how fast it is. Okay, here we go. Starting with the apron. All right. And I will tell you, I do tweak the gravy recipe just a teeny little bit because I feel like it. Now, I'm going to get started by turning the oven on to 350 degrees. There we go. And I'm going to tilt this down to where you can see on the stove. First thing I'm going to do is get some onions chopped. Her recipe calls for 1 medium chopped onion, and you only put half of that in the meatloaf. 1 or 1.5 pounds ground beef. I do about 1 1/4 pounds. A cup of breadcrumbs. I use oatmeal instead, and sometimes I use just 3/4 cup. That's plenty. Tablespoon of Worcestershire sauce. 1 raw egg. No, you can't have any. Come on, it's time to get down. Come on. Say goodbye, Betty. Okay. And now we wash our hands. And then salt and pepper to taste. So, you know me, I use green onion. Yeah. And you will put some in the gravy also, but right now I'm just focusing on how much I'm going to put in the meatloaf. A bit more. Now this recipe, I have 2 friends that come almost every single week, and they ask for this regularly, so I make this every other week pretty much. Okay, so this is how much onion I put in. Depending on your meatloaf, you may want more, you may want less, and that's okay. You do what tastes best to you. Okay. A bit of salt. Black pepper. More salt. Go. And I do use the quick cook oats for this. So, yeah. A little bit less than a cup. 1 egg. Teaspoon Worcestershire. Nessa. No, get down. She's arguing with me now. No. I feel bad for those of you who have kids, that you have to do all your cooking with the kids in the house. I know it's worse when you have kids than when you have pets. And my ground beef. So I've got the oatmeal, onion, yep, and the Worcestershire, salt and pepper. Now I know there are some people out there who don't want to get their hands dirty, but I'm not one of those people. So here we go. And it's going to be messy, and it's going to be sloppy, and it's going to be yucky, but that's okay. It washes right off. If If you could see this cat, she's sitting on the chair. If looks could kill, she's so mad at me right now. Wow. They try to hypnotize you with their eyes. They open their eyes real big when you're cooking. They want you to give them all the food. Okay. Let's mix up real good. I line my pan with tin foil. And then I shape it into the loaf. My mom used to like to make too many loaves. I don't do that. I just do one loaf. Ta-da! And that's going to go in the oven until it's done. And that's 45 minutes to an hour. Now I'm going to wash up and we're going to start the gravy. Okay. The ingredients for this, I'm going to use a gluten-free flour. You can use regular flour, or you can find a cornstarch gravy recipe online, which is really easy to make. My ingredients are 4 ounces of sliced mushrooms, which is, I'll show you. It's half of one of these packs. And I don't just slice them, I dice them. And I use green onions also. I use about the same amount of both. So, that's started. You're being an asshole today. There we go. And that's how to make the cat get down. Okay. You melt 2 tablespoons of butter. I use 3 though. In your pan, 3 tablespoons. Because your vegetables are going to soak up a little bit of this grease, and then you want exactly the same amount of grease as you have flour, because that makes the right consistency. And there are some people who make gravy differently, but this is what I found works for me. It works really well. Melting all that. And I do need to get a Band-Aid. Clumsy, clumsy. Are you happy now, kitty cat? She's so mad at me. There we go. They say the longer you cook, the less you cut yourself. I don't think that's true. I don't think that's true at all. I will always cut myself all the days of my life when I'm cooking. There we go. It's a very small cut, though. There we go. All right. So while that butter's melting, I'm going to start chopping the vegetables. Very small pieces here. Okay, that's how many onions I'm going to put in. And then the mushrooms are going to have to be washed. Technically, they do wash them at the factory, but they have a little bit of that growth particle on them. So we've got about, you can use about half this pack. There we go. Okay, so that's how many I'm using. These wash up really quickly. Those are washed. Now, some people like to dry their mushrooms off because they don't like to put water in with the butter. I don't usually dry them. Now, to make it easier on yourself, go ahead and pull the stems out before you start chopping. Some people throw the stems away, but I don't. I use them because you want lots of mushroom in this gravy. And if you make mushroom gravy and you like your slices larger, that's okay. But I like my slices really small. That's what I'm going to do. See there? The size that I chop mine. And they're going to shrink down a little bit as you cook them. See? Very simple. We are about 11 minutes in. And once the cooking starts of this gravy, it's going to go really fast. One more. And then the stems. See that? I actually have more mushrooms than onions. Now, the stems are easy to slice. There, see that? Like that. That butter is just about ready. Okay, so I'm going to turn the heat up to medium-high. There we go. Just got a little teeny bit more of the stem slice. Now, if you use regular onions, you're going to want to soften those a little bit before you put the mushrooms in. But green onions, they cook pretty quickly, so I just put everything in at the same time. Okay, ready? You see about how much this is? It's plenty. Here we go. There's a trick that my dad showed me to making gravy. Some people like to use a whisk or wooden spoon. But the beauty of a fork is you can separate everything better. So, all right, let's see how long this takes. I'm going to turn the heat up just a little bit more. There we go. There we go. There it goes. And you can salt it and pepper it at any time. There we go. This smells fantastic. So you see we've got a good mix of onions and mushrooms in here. I do have more mushrooms than onions though. I thought I had an equal amount. Yeah. A little bit more. I have had a love affair with mushrooms my whole life. Ah, that smells wonderful. Let's just be a few more minutes. It really doesn't take that long at all. If you have your mushrooms in larger pieces and you have other kinds of onions, it's going to take longer to cook because they have to cook through more. But the smaller pieces aid in speeding things up a little bit. You can hear the hiss of psst from the cooking. It's just a wonderful sound. Yes. Now this pan I've had for a good 10 years. It's a chef's. I don't know if that brand is good or not, but it's lasted me 10 years and I use it almost every single day. I know people don't like the Teflon lined anymore, but it's Teflon lined. Good stuff. Okay, that let me know that the oven is ready. And the meatloaf is sizzling in there. It'll take 45 minutes to an hour, but that's okay. I always go ahead and make my gravy while I'm doing this so that that's ready in advance, and then I either make white rice or mashed potatoes to go with it. Today I'm going to make mashed potatoes later. Everybody loves my mashed potatoes. I keep the skin on. I do. I use lots of butter and lots of milk, and I use my best friend. I use this to just mash my potatoes, and instead of making them whipped, I've never liked that texture. Okay, so I'm going to show you this, how nicely it's bubbling. You can see that. So this is almost ready. Some people say that mushrooms sweat a little bit when you cook them, and it makes the broth in here combined with butter just this wonderful beige color. You want to get the mushrooms and the onions completely done before you even put the broth on, because once you put the broth on, the cooking is really fast. All right, next step. I'm going to need my tablespoon measure again. Got the Worcestershire sauce off of it. And I use the Pamela's gluten-free artisan mixed flour. It's just wonderful. And I use this measure for measure. So my recipe calls for two tablespoons of flour. So we're going to do 2 tablespoons gluten-free, wonderful, stomach-saving flour. And this next part is crucial. You want to completely stir that up, because you want the liquid that's surrounding the vegetables to completely soak up that flour. Completely. You want that completely incorporated. You don't want to see any white from that flour at all. And then you flatten that out like I did, and you give it about a minute to cook. And while you're doing that, you can put the lid on your spices and wrap your flour back up. See, it really doesn't take much flour to make a big pan of gravy. That's something that I did not know growing up, because my mom would just throw the flour and throw the broth in there. But if you measure everything, it's perfect every time. You don't have to stand at the stove and try and throw out a batch if it doesn't work. I've seen people do that before, throw the batch out because they could not get the measurements right. And you want to do it in this order so that your gravy is not lumpy. Okay, so we've given that a minute to mix together, and here we go with some more broth. Now, I know I don't have enough beef broth, so I may use a little bit of chicken broth, and yes, I've done that before. You can mix broths. Nobody ever complains. I'm using 12 ounces. Yep. Here we go, low sodium broth. So I'm just going to eyeball it. There we go. That's got it. Now, since I dropped the fork on the floor, I'm going to have to wash it, because you don't want to put that in the pan. Or maybe I will and not tell anybody. Now, I'm going to wash it. All right. Now you're going to stir all that to where it's completely smooth. Completely smooth. So all of that flour and butter stuck together to make a paste, and now you're going to mix the broth with the paste until it's just a thick broth. But once it starts boiling is when it's going to thicken. We're going to give it a second. You don't have to stir it the whole time just because I am. You just got to make sure to keep it smooth. Make sure it doesn't stick to the bottom. It's actually thickening a little bit now. But once it bubbles, it'll thicken even more. And then the first thing I'm going to do is put it in this and pop it in the fridge. There we go. It's starting to bubble. Bubble, bubble, bubble. So probably a little over 10 minutes from start to finish to make the gravy after you get started. There it goes. It's bubbling nicely. And I'm just going to let it, because I've already stirred it smooth. Let it bubble a little bit. Mix it. You don't want to stir it to death. Let it keep bubbling. And you can do this at higher or lower heat, but if you do it at higher heat, you're going to have to watch it. I've got it at 6 out of 8, which is medium high. And the recipe calls for 14 ounces of liquid, but I think that that's just too much liquid. In my opinion, I like it a little bit thicker, and everybody who eats at my house does too. Oh, that feels good. Just going to give it a little teeny bit longer. And that's done. So the next thing I'm going to do is put this away, and I'm going to make my mashed potatoes, and when the meatloaf is done, I'm going to wrap that up and put it in the fridge too, because company's coming tonight, and we just slice it off and microwave it, and that's good. Alright, and that is how I make my meatloaf and mushroom gravy from Miss Sandra Lee's Salisbury steak recipe. And this has been Eating in April, so I'll see you next time.